Hello and welcome to Cloud Insider's Tech Focus, brought to you by Xtravirt. Today we are talking about Service-Defined Firewall. We are talking with Steve Wood, a senior consultant for Xtravirt. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. How's about yourself?
Yeah, very good. Looking forward to this.
So good to hear. So, Steve, would you be able to briefly outline what Service-Defined Firewall is and what business challenges it solves?
Yeah, of course. So Service-Defined Firewall is a new offering from VMware using existing product sets. So it's the amalgamation of AppDefense, which we've talked about previously on Cloud Insiders, and also NSX micro-segmentation, which we've also talked about. So it's quite cool that the third time I'm on here, we're talking about both products again, but as one service offering. And the real challenge is the application and service landscape is so dynamic now that existing firewalls, which has fairly static content, just can no longer keep up. And that's the real business challenge that Service-Defined Firewall is set to solve.
It's funny, we were talking with Ian Jenkins from the NSX department of VMware the other day, and he was saying that when it comes to security and firewalling and stuff, it has now moved from the big eating the small, and it's now just the fast catching the slow. So the slowest to react are just getting blown away by how fast the technology is moving.
Yeah, it's really come on. And if you look at the history and the life cycle of NSX in the security side, so micro-segmentation, so there was the initial release of micro-segmentation back when VMware acquired Nicira and announced NSX, and then there was sort of micro-segmentation 2.0, which did some L7 sort of context filtering, so a little bit more intelligence. And obviously we've got micro-segmentation Service-Defined Firewall, so 3.0, which leverages AppDefense. So yeah, it's really moved on in the few years I've been working with the product.
And so it's called Service-Defined Firewall. What makes it a service and not a software-defined?
Yes, I guess as I was saying before, applications and services are just constantly changing, and also they're in different platforms, different flavors. So you've got VMs, bare metal, containers, and it's just a constantly changing landscape. So you need a security policy that can also constantly change and adapt as the service and the application does. I think that's hence that sort of explains the service-defined part there.
Cool. So is there anything out there that's anything like this?
No, is the quick answer. The reason being, a lot of traditional sort of enterprise firewalls, including some sort of next-gen firewalls, are designed to block threats at the network perimeter. So Service-Defined Firewall, NSX and AppDefense, VMware obviously have the unique position to be able to bake that into the hypervisor, which is massive. And if you think about that for a few seconds, what does that mean? So the attack surface or the attack vector is normally inside the operating system, so inside the OS. And the key differentiator here is the fact that AppDefense and NSX are outside the attack surface, so they're inside the vSphere hypervisor. So there isn't an agent that runs inside the guest. We also leverage App Verification Cloud, which is a cloud-based solution where all the AI machine learning takes place. So VMware obviously have a massive footprint and can leverage all the data that they're churning from various different customers and their own R&D labs and sources like Carbon Black that they've just recently acquired to really understand what is known good.
Yeah.
And that's all done in the cloud, so it's not on premises. So again, it's distributed and separate. That's what it is. That's why it's different. That's why it's so cool.
That's brilliant. So what environments are best suited to Service-Defined Firewall? Can it go anywhere that a user has vSphere installed?
Yeah, pretty much. So again, Service-Defined Firewall is just the combined service offering of NSX and AppDefense. So the best place to go is the VMware website, and you've got the compatibility matrix. So as long as you can run AppDefense and you can run NSX, and you have the correct version of vSphere and any other VMware products, just check the interoperability matrix on the VMware site, and it will let you know if you can run those.
Awesome. So you actually wrote an article for us not that long ago, all on the Service-Defined Firewall and how brilliant it's going to be. You mentioned how it goes beyond layer 7 inspection. Could you give us a brief breakdown of Dante's 7 layers of networking?
Yeah, okay. So to give you a bit of an insight as to how these podcast works do send me over a bit of a script beforehand, and when I saw this, I was like, oh, how am I going to explain this on a podcast? So I did a little bit of research, and I've actually pinched somebody else's analogy on this, which is quite cool. So yeah, let me run with that. Okay, so 7 pillars of the OSI model. So the first one, if you like, if we start the other way around, so start with the user, which is above the application layer. So here's an analogy. So let's say I'll write a letter. So the user has the idea to write a letter. So the layer 7, which is the application layer, in this scenario would be the pen and paper. Okay, so you've got the user who decides to write a letter. The layer 7, the app layer, is the pen and paper.
Right.
Layer 6, the presentation layer, would be deciding to write that letter in English. Okay.
Okay.
So we've had the idea to write a letter. We're going to do it on pen and paper, and now we're going to do it in English. Okay, that's how we're going to present it. Layer 5, the session layer, would be to make sure that my letter fits on a single page. If not, I need to number the pages so it arrives in the right order. Yeah, and that's exactly the same in the networking stack. So if we're going to send a large amount of data, we need to make sure all the packets arrive in sequence, and that's what we're doing in the session layer. Layer 4 is kind of in two, right? So there's a transport layer, which is the upper side, which is deciding that I'm going to write to Kieran as opposed to Lee. Okay, so it's deciding who you're going to address the letter to. The lower part of the transport layer, so still layer 4, but the lower part of it is saying, I'd actually like special delivery on that. So I get a signature when it gets there, because I need to know it's been received. So layer 3, the network layer, the post office sees that the destination is Newcastle, and it'll get placed in groups for all the other mail that is going to Newcastle. Layer 2, the data link layer, sorts that mail and puts it into the Newcastle bag with all the other mail that's going to Newcastle. Okay, and the physical layer is, of course, the postman. Okay, so how that mail in that bag then gets to Newcastle. So it goes in a car, a van, or a road. So it's the physical part of delivering that letter. So I saw that explanation, thought it was actually quite good at explaining it for people that maybe aren't too network savvy or maybe aren't too familiar with that model.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Yeah, I think I need some sort of medal or award for that, Stu, then.
I will whip something up and then we will send it in the post.
Yeah, look forward to it. Yeah, it's a good job Raw Mail aren't part of the network, because we'd never get anything. It'd always be late.
Oh, poor Royal Mail. They try their best. So, since NSX came around half a decade ago, we've been talking about how micro-segmentation defends us against lateral movement within a perimeter firewall. How is Service-Defined Firewall boosting the toolset of the already mighty micro-seg?
Okay, so let me try and provide an example of maybe how an attack would happen, and then with and without Service-Defined Firewall, and maybe you can see how it complements micro-segmentation. So let's give this a go. In this scenario, let's say you've got a 3-tier app. So you've got a web tier, an app tier, and a database tier. And you might have antivirus that runs inside those 3 VMs. And then you've got a traditional firewall that opens port 80 or 443 to the web server, because that's a compulsory port. You need that port open for the application to run. Mm-hmm. I'm an attacker. I come along, and there's some sort of unpatched vulnerability on that web server that allows me to connect into your network via port 80. So now I'm on side the web server. Okay, so I've got into your network, I've passed the perimeter firewall, and I'm actually on the web server itself due to some unpatched vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So once I'm on that, the first thing generally an attacker is going to do is try and disable any tool sets inside that OS that are going to prevent it from completing the attack. So the first thing that goes are antivirus. Very predictable. There's only certain vendors in that market, so it's quite easy for people to come up with an attack on the AV and disable it. So now I've killed your antivirus, I can really start doing what I want. And in a traditional sense, there's nothing stopping me really from moving laterally across the network, because remember, the firewall was only at the perimeter and we've already passed that. So I can run all sorts of attacks, brute force passwords, try and get access to your SQL database and expose the data. And if I couldn't do that, you could just drop in some ransomware, just for fun.
Or a Bitcoin miner and use all your CPU.
Absolutely. So that's the traditional sense. So what Service-Defined Firewall really does to improve that, if we rerun this with those elements in, and I can explain what it does. So again, we've still got port 80 open to the web server. We might still have the same vulnerability. So the attacker can still get into the web server, okay? Because the vulnerability is not patched. We're not solving that challenge yet, okay?
Yeah.
Once you're on the web server, depending on how you have app defense configured, the attacker can do one or two things. If app defense is just in alert mode, the attacker can still move around inside the web server. So you can try and launch processes, fire up PowerShell scripts to try and brute force passwords. App defense is just going to be sitting there. It's going to be recording everything that attacker does and sending alerts to you, but it's not going to do anything to stop that threat.
Yeah.
Now, if the attacker tries and moves laterally, it isn't going to be able to, because you've got a firewall in there now. So it can only necessarily move from the web server to the SQL server on that port, and that might not be a known attack vector. It might not be able to do what it wants over those specific ports because you've got micro-segmentation. So it can't easily now move laterally within the data center. If app defense was deployed in block mode, as soon as you arrived on that VM and did anything that was different from the known good, and this is the key point. So app defense, along with the app verification cloud, knows the known good state of that VM. So as soon as you fire up putty, or as soon as you fire up a command prompt or a PowerShell script, it knows that's not normal behavior, and it can be really aggressive with what it does next. So it can shut the VM down, it can quarantine it, and by quarantine, I mean it can suspend the VM, or it can apply firewall rules to that VM that isolate it from the network, and only one VM on your network that might have some of the tool sets like additional antivirus tools to be able to clean up the threat. So as soon as that attacker does anything, app defense kicks in and locks it all down. And that is the key difference here. And leveraging micro-segmentation and app defense, they work in tandem to prevent any of these attacks moving laterally within the data center.
Perfect.
So hopefully that was a good enough explanation, Stu.
Well, if I understood it, then everyone can understand it. So, yeah, I think that was beautifully done. So, as a man who has obviously watched far too many movies, how does the solution defend itself? I mean, would all policies and behaviours be known and compromised from a single centralised source in this case?
So yeah, it's a good question, right? It's not just like there's one kill switch. VMware are a little bit cleverer than that. So let me try and explain it. So the approach, the service-defined firewall is multifaceted. So you've got on-premise parts and you've got cloud parts. So if we talk about the on-premise parts, so NSX and AppDefense, the key here is their positioning. They're inside the hypervisor. They're not inside the guest. So with our previous analogy, the attacker gets on the web server, they've disabled the antivirus, but they can't disable app defense and they can't disable NSX because it's inside the hypervisor. The attacker does not have access to that. There's really no such thing as a VM escape. It's a bit of an urban myth, right? They can't escape out of that VM and get inside the hypervisor. It's secure from that sense. Then the cloud side, which is where all the AI machine learning takes place, is distributed and secure. So it's not on premises. So again, that's a completely different attack surface, isolated from the attacker inside the web server. So yeah, there's not just one weak point. There's multiple different points that are all very, very secure because they're not in the normal attack service of an attack.
Brilliant. So how do you see it paving the way for the future of VMware networking technologies?
So the key here is the AI and machine learning aspects of the solution. VMware are very keen to leverage AI and machine learning elsewhere in the stack. So maybe something that would be pretty cool is we're leveraging AI and machine learning to automatically secure VMs. Okay, so we know what's known good. We can automatically create firewall rules for those apps, which is pretty cool when you think about it. So you spin up an application, we monitor it, or we use the tool set and the massive amount of information that's in App Verification Cloud to understand that app. We know what it's meant to do. We automatically create the firewall rules. I think the next sort of future steps wouldn't it be really cool if then we could just automatically create different network aspects for that application? So if it's a web server and you've got multiple web servers, then you're probably going to want a load balancer. So why don't we just automatically deploy a load balancer for you and configure it? So I think that is probably the direction that would be good to head in with AI machine learning. Automate more of the network, not just the security aspects.
Yeah, because we're recording this in the week that they've announced NSX 2.5 and NSX Intelligence.
Absolutely.
I'm literally, because we only discussed this pre-show, sat here on a VMware blog trying to work out what this means. Have you got any information on it as of yet?
Yeah. So I think NSX Intelligence it's a cool name, and it's the start of VMware's big vision on AI machine learning. So they've started with Service-Defined Firewall, and it is a bit of a breakout of that, but maybe a little bit of a look into the future as to what VMware are planning to do with AI machine learning, and NSX Intelligence is the brand name there. So yeah, maybe they are looking at automating the rest of the network piece. It would make sense, right? Start with security first, because that's always a big ask, and it's a real concern now. You just have to look at some of the recent fines for data breaches, especially in the UK. There's been some record fines this year and last. So security inside the data center, lateral movement is a massive concern to businesses. So yeah, it makes sense to use AI machine learning to help in that area. Automation and time to market is probably second to that. And I think that's probably where NSX Intelligence is going to head in that direction.
Beautiful. Have you got any further tips or insights for people looking to better secure their environment?
Yeah, of course. Why don't you reach out to us at Xtravirt? The team are really experienced. We've deployed micro-segmentation and AppDefense in a whole host of verticals, defense and finance being some of the most interesting. So reach out to us. It's a joined up approach with NSX and AppDefense. In the past, if customers only had NSX and micro-segmentation, we'd use tools like vRealize Network Insight to help look at their application portfolio and suggest rules, which we could then integrate into NSX. The cool thing about the service-defined firewall is NSX kind of leans on AppDefense to provide that information. And again, using App Verification Cloud and analyzing your apps, AppDefense will actually suggest rule sets for you. So yeah, it's a little bit more of a joined up approach than just deploying micro-segmentation on its own.
Yeah. You say about NSX, but it's rather essential to say at this point that NSXT is a must, isn't it? Because NSXV is actually on its way out. I believe it's January 2022 and it's set for its own demise.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of a very good point to raise. So customers who are on NSXV need to be aware that the end of general support is January 2022, which sounds like it's a long way away, but it's not. So really, as a business, you want to be on NSXT in the next 12 months. You don't want to be leaving this to the last minute. And a lot of organizations need to be planning their budgets for next year, or already have. So you really need to start planning the upgrade from NSXV to NSXT now. They are two different products. They work in two separate ways. There are toolkits and migration toolkits coming from VMware. VMware know this is something they need to focus on for the next 12 months. So they're putting a lot of R&D and automated scripts to move customers from V to T, but it still needs some consultancy to manage this process. So absolutely reach out to us if you're on NSXV, and we can work out a plan and a time scale that fits around you to help you move from V to T. But you've got to do it before Jan 2022 if you want to remain in support.
Brilliant. If anyone's a little bit confused about what the difference between NSXT and NSXV, we actually released a episode back in August. So if you want to check that out on cloudinsiders.fm, you can there. Steve, anything else you need to add? Or
I think we're good.
Brilliant. In which case, Steve, thank you so much. I mean, that's been hugely insightful, and you've opened up my eyes to so many other elements of networking as well, which is always massively helpful.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool offering from VMware, especially the AI and the machine learning parts. So that's pretty cool and different, right? So it's good to work with that technology.
I mean, ultimately, this is just stage one of the future for VMware's networking, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a snapshot into what direction VMware are heading in.
Brilliant. If anyone would like to reach out and chat to you about this or any of the other episodes that you've been on, how's best to get hold of you?
You can find me on Twitter, so at surfing_clouds, and LinkedIn, or via the Xtravirt website.
That's absolutely brilliant. And to anyone who wants to hear more episodes of Cloud Insiders, you can find us at cloudinsiders.fm. You can follow us on Twitter at Cloud Insiders. We're now available across all your favourite podcast downloading sites. We're now on Spotify, and we've got every episode up on YouTube. We can also be found on iTunes, and if you want, you can leave us a lovely comment and a 5-star rating. Anything below 5 and we will hunt you down. Steve, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Stu. It's been good.
It's been great. Cheers.